carry me back to old Virginia.
Welcome back to the Virginia History Podcast. In the last episode, I detailed events leading to the Virginia Colonies organization, the initial Atlantic crossing, and the settlers' first landing at Cape Henry in April 1607. Let's continue our story from there on this Jamestown Day 2016. In hindsight, the first settlers' landing was portentous. It was a celebration, but it was a misguided celebration. The settlers had good reason to be excited in that they had successfully sailed across the Atlantic Ocean. No small feat in the 1600s, let alone today. They had grandiose ideas of untold wealth to be easily had in Virginia, and they thought that they had the pedigree to effect their desired outcomes. But the initial small Indian raid was the first taste of a bitter reality to be realized over the next decade. Shortly after returning to their ship's safety, Captain Newport ordered his men to open the Virginia Company's secret box. In it, the men would find out who was to govern the English New World venture. Excitement filled the air as each name was read aloud. Christopher Newport, Edward Maria Wingfield, Bartholomew Gosnold, and John Ratcliffe, also known as Sycamore, the four men already understood to be in leadership, were read first. Then came the final three names: John Martin, who was the sickly son of the London mayor Richard Martin, and directly backed by many of the wealthy merchants funding the campaign. John was also part of the voyage that had rescued the failed Lane's colony attempt at Roanoke Island in 1586, which gave him a sort of special status among the settlers. George Kendall's name was called next. His appointment also seems to have a tinge of nepotism in that he was related to Edwin Sandys, a well-known supporter of the colony. But that nepotism was also mixed with a heavy dose of political control as well, because Kendall was connected with Lord Salisbury, who expected to receive frequent reports from his New World ally. Finally, they read the last name, which stunned the voyagers. It was their captive, the 27-year-old adventurer John Smith. After John Smith's name was read, panic may like to have set in as a result, but Newport elected to keep John Smith in the Susan Constance hold, at least for the time being, and thus avoided another battle. Yet after the names were read and published, tensions did not cease. George Percy and Gabriel Archer felt that their names should have been on the seven-man short list, especially because of the promotional work that they had done back in England. But for one reason or another, such as George Percy's brother, Thomas, being part of the infamous gunpowder plot to blow up the House of Lords and so kill King James, both men were passed over. Archer and Percy's issues were not the main concern at the moment, however, though they did contribute to the general unrest. The elected council was to choose a president who would govern with considerable power for a year, unless a majority voted to remove the unwanted office holder. Yet that first vote was cast into doubt due to Smith's appointment. The 6 free members did not want to release their 7th colleague from prison. That, accompanied with Archer and Percy's ire, caused Newport and Wingfield to question the Virginia Company's London leadership structure, possible treason by standards of the contract. Regardless, Edward Maria Wingfield was eventually chosen as the colony's first president, and the first, very Spartan type of English New World American government was formed between April 28th and May 14th, 1607. From the start, Wingfield and Newport opened a breach between themselves. Wingfield wanted complete supremacy, but Newport continued to hold his claim of total authority while he was at sea or ashore in Virginia as the venture's admiral. Newport therefore paid little to no attention to Wingfield, as Newport led a 2-week-long exploration journey up the Powhatan River, later named James by the English in honor of King James. After the previous day's Indian attack, the group kept a steady lookout for more Indian action, and they did spot something at the outset. They saw smoke which marked a campfire cooking oysters. Curious about the situation, a scouting party marched to the scene where a canoe was also spotted, but no Indians were seen, and being good gentlemen, they did not want to let the good food go to waste, so they happily ate the oyster meal, which was, quote, very large and delicate in taste. In the meantime, the rest of the men aboard the 3 ships finished assembling the Venture's shallop, which was to be used for Newport's river exploration. After the shallop was completed, Captain Newport selected various gentlemen, who then set out with the captain to pick an adequate settlement location. Other than John White's 1585 map, the men were completely lost. They chose to follow the Chesapeake Bay's southern shore towards Skikoak. First, they entered a wide inlet, most likely modern-day Lynnhaven Inlet, and discovered a 45-foot-long canoe as well as an enormous pile of oysters that contained rough pearls. From there, the men pushed further inland into modern Virginia Beach's interior, where they reported fertile land, flowers, goodly trees, and a late spring Virginia delicacy, strawberries, that Percy claims were 4 times larger than the strawberries back in England. Accompanied with all of this goodness, the English once again saw great columns of smoke. They decided to return to their boat because they couldn't discern for what purpose the Indians used the smoke, perhaps as signals to a forward marching army. If that were so, the small band would not be able to withstand an onslaught, so better to be safe than sorry. At day's end the first day, no safe harbor was discovered, but Newport was indefatigable. He sent his men back out to thoroughly map the estuary depths, and after many more hours sounding well into the dark, Newport's men returned to report that they had in fact discovered depths from 6 to 12 fathoms deep, which was suitable enough for heavier shipping traffic. After Gabriel Archer joyfully heard the news, he excitedly named the land at the inlet's northern point Cape Comfort, part of today's Hampton, Virginia. Because of his men's findings by April 30th, Newport now safely felt that he could steer his 3-ship fleet into the Chesapeake Bay. As the English passed by Cape Comfort, today called Point Comfort, they noticed 5 Indians running along the shoreline trying to keep pace with the Susan Constant. After primitive gestures of friendship were displayed between the two groups, the English reasoned that these Indians were friendly and then followed them to their town in Kecoughtan. Kecoughtan, located on the lower peninsula of today's Phoebus section of Hampton, was a garden-like village made from young trees of about 20 houses total. They were an Algonquin people who were previously conquered by the regional chieftain, Powhatan. They were simple, friendly people, much fitting the stories told about the naturals back in England. They were mostly naked, having only their, quote, privities covered, and bodies were painted with bright colors. Following a ceremony, one that greatly frightened George Percy because of the potential idolatry and demonism, the English continued their trip up the soon-to-be-dubbed James River. They next came to Paspaheag, where they were being entertained by Chief Wawinchepunk and his people when another Indian guide approached. This guide was from the Queocahannock tribe, and they were jealous of the attention being paid to the Paspaheags. Happy at their newfound situation, the adventurers moved across the river to the land they called Salisbury Side, in honor of Lord Cecil, Earl of Salisbury. Upon their arrival, they met Chief Chappook, who greatly impressed the Englishmen due to his silvery-flecked blue body paint. Could the shimmery substance contain the desired precious metals being sought? Upon further discovery, no precious metals were found. The paint itself was from a local root, and the sparkly substance seemed to be antimony. Alas, no silver or gold. Otherwise, the well-ordered cornfields and tobacco offered by the Indians also impressed the English, who soon continued their journey up the river. To this point, all of their Indian encounters were somewhat peaceful. This next stop, however, was not so placid. Newport and his men came across the Appomattox tribe, who were out in force against the invaders. After Newport spent some time gesturing peace, the angry tribe eventually welcomed the English ashore. This tribe, however, still remained warlike, even after being calmed. They had impressive wooden swords that could apparently cut a man in 2 on show in order to frighten their strange invaders. Perhaps the English did not feel welcome here, at present City Point Hopewell, because they spent a short amount of time with the Appomattox. Regardless, while with the tribe, Newport received assurance that there was no reason to sail upriver in search of a good settlement location. That being the case, on May 12th, the English returned back downriver to a location Gabriel Archer named Archer's Hope, along today's College Creek, just north of Hogg's Island and 5 miles east of what would become Jamestown. It was also part of the land involved in the fateful Ayakan Jesuit mission. The land was fruitful and seemingly well defensible, but debate over the location flared anyway. Wingfield did not like that the sandy banks hindered heavy ship traffic, and his opinion eventually won the day. Archer's Hope was out, but they didn't sit still for long and sailed back northward to another location mentioned by the Paspaheag. It was a small island dangling from the mainland like a piece of fruit, according to historian Benjamin Woolley. It had the desired deep waters needed for heavy shipping to sail close by. In fact, the settlers tested this by sailing one of their vessels close by and tethering it to the trees on the land. It passed the test, but did it meet the other desired requirements? Again, debate ensued, but this time the land's apparent bounty, defensibility, and shipworthiness swayed opinion in favor of settlement. Thus, on May 14th, after 2 weeks of exploration, the English unloaded their vessels, began working in earnest to clear the land, and made Jamestown Island, named in honor of their king, their home. Thank you for your continued support of the Virginia History Podcast. If you like what is being produced, please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher, like us on Facebook, and visit the website at vahistorypodcast.com. I also greatly welcome any feedback you may have to offer, especially as I'm still learning about the podcasting process. Please join me again when we continue covering the unfolding events after Jamestown's establishment, Indian troubles, and mismanagement. Until then, happy Jamestown Day.
Oh, Baba, do, 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 do,